Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, was the first one I ever saw. My dad took me to a video store in late 1993 and I chose agonisingly between Halloween 4 and 5. I chose number 4 and the rest is history. I went home, watched it that night on my own. My dad wasn't with me and I can't even tell you how creeped out I was watching this movie right from the opening titles that play out eerily over that set of farming equipment and Halloween props that are just lying around at the start. And for a while in the 90s, this was not only my favourite horror film, but probably my favourite film across all genres. A title it held for a little time, but of course, 25 plus years have passed since then. I've seen hundreds, thousands more great films. And I think if I wrote out a top 100 list now, I'm not even sure that Halloween 4 would be on that list, but it's still a special film for me. I always enjoy catching up with it whenever I do a Halloween marathon. Now, the plot of the movie sees Michael Myers wake from a 10-year coma because he finds out he's got a niece that he never knew about, and of course can't have family members alive and well somewhere. He's got to go and kill them. So he escapes custody and goes on a bloody rampage to try and get her, chased all the while by Donald Pleasance's Sam Loomis. It's kind of ironic that at the end of number 2, Loomis clearly dies, whereas Laurie is alive, yet we come to this sequel. Laurie's not in it, but Loomis is coming back. Now, I think there has been a little bit of effort to go back to basics with this one. We don't have the kind of novelty setting of Halloween 2 with the hospital. We're very much back to picket fences and rows of houses all lined up for a slaughter. But despite that, the body count in this one is more in line with Halloween 2, and there are some kind of car stunts and explosions that have crept in, kind of symptoms of the late 80s. We've definitely moved on a bit since when Halloween 1 and 2 first came out. One thing I do like about this one compared to the early ones is that a lot of the characters seem very aware about the Myers threat from an early stage. This is no better demonstrated when most of the principals barricade themselves into the sheriff's house and bolt all the windows and tool up with shotguns and things. Outside you've got all these rednecks driving around and they've got loads of guns. It feels like Myers has got a challenge in this film, and maybe that's as it should be third time around. Characterization in Halloween 4 is very strong. I don't think Loomis gets as many good one-liners as he does in Halloween 2 or even the first film, but what he does get is this tremendous sort of mini-adventure on this highway at the start of the film. I mean, he has it out with Myers at this petrol station, and then he gets picked up by this preacher and they have a really comedic scene. Going back to the petrol station, there's this terrific bit where Loomis has to jump over these barrels to avoid this explosion. It's so funny. I mean, I presume it must be a stunt double, but it cracks me up every single time. Now, Laurie might not be in the film, but to replace her, we get not one but 2 brilliant new leads. There's that aforementioned niece, Jamie Lloyd, played by Danielle Harris. Brilliantly written, brilliantly acted, and I'd have to say this is probably my favourite child lead of all time. It's not, I suppose I've not seen that many child leads, actually, but take the compliment, Danielle, take the compliment. Ellie Cornell as Rachel Carruthers plays a more conventional protagonist, but she's brave, she's tough. She's got an interesting character flaw in that she's ridiculously desperate for love. You know, it's usually the other way around with these characters. If they're single, there's more a pushback towards the other way. They don't want anything to do with love. But I'd also like to mention Beau Starr as Sheriff Meeker, who continues the long line of really good law enforcement officers in the Halloween movies. But he's probably the best of the bunch. And I'll tell you what, the minute he leaves that barricaded house, that place feels a hell of a lot less safe. Now, I'm not going to mention the kills too much in this review because this is definitely a film that's more about the scares and the tension, you know, the idea of the boogeyman being in the shadows. It's very much in the spirit of the original film, even if the body count is higher. And a lot of the best scenes in this movie don't involve kills. So early on, you've got this scene where Jamie wakes up and she thinks that Myers is under the bed and he sort of sits up and, God, that's a freaky bit. And then she runs towards the doorway and he's behind that as well somehow. It's just brilliant. And it's so early in the film as well. And it's dark. There's rain beating against the window. Probably like 3 miles while this is going on. Myers is killing people for real in the ambulance for all we know. Later on, there's the scene where Rachel loses Jamie when they're out trick-or-treating and she ends up down this alleyway and she sees Myers down the other end. She runs down this other segment of alleyway, tries to jump over this fence, and I swear I thought Myers was going to teleport and grab her legs or come round the other side or something. You know, one thing I really hate in media publications or whatever is when people say, oh, Halloween had this great original film and then it was all downhill after that. The sequels just weren't scary anymore. I mean, have they seen Halloween 4? Or another thing you see is whenever Halloween film does well, like Halloween 2018 or H2O, they say stuff like, oh, it's the scariest one since the original. Halloween 4, anyone? Anyway, one more scene that I really like that's scary is towards the end when Jamie's in this schoolhouse and she's running down this corridor and she's trying all the doors and they're all locked. And then she turns around and Myers isn't there somehow, so she retraces her steps and then she sees him on like the staircase. It's just, oh God, it's brilliant. Really, really good. And I can't mention all these positives without mentioning the ending. It is one of the all-time great horror endings. I mean, I won't say what the twist is, but it just rounds off the first 3 Michael Myers films perfect. If this was the last one they made, it would have capped off a trilogy brilliantly. In fact, all the early films had great endings that could have finished the series. End of number 1, if they'd ended it there, fine. If they'd ended it after number 2, that would have been a fine ending. Same with Halloween 4, and it wasn't until the end of Halloween 5 where finally they did something where it wasn't really satisfying and they had to carry it on. But I guess that was Mustafa Akid's intention all along. Now, there are some negatives in the film. They're mostly small things, but I'll mention them anyway just to be fair. So the mask, the much documented Halloween 4 mask, it's not great. I will say that when I first watched the film, I had nothing to compare it to, so I just thought it was fine. And it's only really in later years when I've watched loads of Halloween films, I've tended to notice that the mask in this one is maybe not so great. I don't think it's great in number 5 either. I think this is quite a weak era in terms of the mask, but it doesn't ruin the film or anything. Also, there's a couple of characters early on in Halloween 4 who I wish had not just walked away from the movie like they did. So we've got the character of Lindsay, who is obviously the same character from Halloween 1. That's been confirmed by the writers, but she just doesn't appear in any more scenes after the one she's in. And I think it would have been interesting if she'd have come back later on, realised that it's the same Michael Myers who freaked her out all those years ago as a kid. That would have been nice to see how she would have reacted to that. I guess we will see that when Halloween Kills comes out next year, but the chance was there in Halloween 4 for us to see that, and we didn't get to. Another character who I would have liked to have seen more of is Wade. He has this really funny scene in the pharmacy where he tries to ask Kelly out and she just tells him to F off. And I had an idea about this guy, actually. It would have been really funny if he'd have been part of the big entourage who showed up at the Mika house later on. And maybe Kelly would have been making coffee and he tried to go in and speak to her again, but before he could get a word out, she once again went, fuck off, Wade, like for the second time in the movie. I think that would have been hilarious. I'm not trying to ruin the movie with too much comedy or anything, but it's just an idea I came up with. And also the scene where Bob Hollister gets killed. I always had an idea, it was Ted Hollister. I always had an idea that he could have been called Ted Tramer maybe, and it could have been a running joke that a different Tramer gets accidentally killed in each Halloween, but like I said, just little things I came up with. This is not a film with much comedy in it, so I don't think that would ruin the movie, but anyway. Another negative, maybe you could say, is that the transition between day and night is a little bit quick. And I mean, I think the film's only something like 86, 87 minutes. I can't remember what, but it feels like there could have been more, maybe 10 minutes more runtime just in that portion of the film, just before it gets to nighttime, just to maybe flesh out 1 or 2 characters. Because as it is, the movie does feel like it's in a desperate rush to get to nighttime, but maybe that was part of the budgetary restrictions, I'm not sure. So I guess it's time to end the review. Obviously you can tell that I really love this movie, but what does the bag of terror say? Let's have a look. What score will Halloween 4 get on the door? We have 4 bloody axes for Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. 4 out of 5. That is excellent. Now, I can't honestly give it 4.5 or 5. It's not a masterpiece. I would seriously have my rose-tinted glasses on if I gave it 4.5 or 5, I think. But 4 is definitely fair. That puts it the same score-wise as Halloween 2. And I think that's about right. So, there's no pin for the horror locations map today. We've already done Haddonfield in Illinois, obviously. So, that's all from me today. I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.